sit alongside the parliamentarians, the civil servants, how they relate to their voters. We'll be looking at young voters, I think, in particular, because they are the ones that consume the most information, be it fake, be it real, be it gossip, whatever, from the outside world. But we'll also be looking at, if you address only them, you will be alienating other members of your society. I'm going to make this as conversational as possible. You have the headsets that allow you to listen to any translations you may receive, and also the microphones. I think you have to press a button to speak. I'm the only one that has unlimited access to the floor. So I'm going to begin by suggesting that young people can feel alienated by the people others, maybe perhaps themselves, have elected to represent them. How do you bridge that gap? Now, Albin Kurti has a young country. It has a very young population. It has a, may I say, relatively young Prime Minister. And I want to know, because Kosovo has high unemployment. It has a lot of youth that have decided to leave and go and seek work elsewhere. How do you address their concerns when they're getting bombarded with information from elsewhere? And then we'll just broaden it out, make it a conversation, hopefully get some people from the floor, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much indeed. Albin.
Thank you very much, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be here today with all of you, with Prime Minister Petkov, Prime Minister Mbalo, and Madam Secretary Buric. Kosovo is a young country with very young population, but with ancient people. And we achieved a landslide victory last year in the elections, thanks to three main social categories support in the society: youth, women, and diaspora. So one of them was also youth, because average age in Kosovo is around 30 years. Therefore, those who are more ready and more interested for change were on our side, we who wanted to have change. Kosovo is a vital democracy because opposition can win. And I believe that this is one of the tests of democracy, whether opposition in a country can win or not. And in Kosovo it did happen. I was in opposition for almost 2 decades and finally got in office with this victory last year. And it is the youth, the young people, who brought us in power because they wanted 2 main things that we were affirming: jobs and justice. Namely, jobs, especially in their profession, but at the same time, justice, not only as court justice, but as social justice and as fairness of the institutions. One element which was very important in us connecting with youth is our program, which implied the link between professional education and labor market, because there is a huge skills gap. Many young people graduate university, but they have no jobs in their profession. And we want to take this model, which is typical for Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, where students go 3 to 4 days in their faculties or in high schools, vocational training, and then also 1 to 2 days they practice this in different enterprises, apprentice and so on. Therefore, this bridge between professional education and labor market, I believe, is crucial for youth. The other thing is that we were very active with our organization, and we were combating fake news by deconstructing them, in a sense that the problem with fake news is not just that they are fake, it's also they are not news. They are just like opinions wrapped as news. And we had a close, massive contact with and communication with young people all over the country. And this close communication with them And these ideas of jobs and justice resonated quite well. But I would just like to add something which, of course, is the most important and the urgent thing today, and that is that we, as Republic of Kosovo, condemn a Russian invasion and military aggression, and we show sympathy, empathy, admiration, and solidarity with the national liberation struggle of Ukrainian people.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I don't want this to become too Eurocentric. We have 3 representatives from Europe here, and everybody will get their chance to say something, but I want to broaden it out straight away. Mr. President, Umaro, if I may address you first of all, and ask specifically about your country. Population round about 2 million, average life expectancy round about 58 years. That is, by comparison with Europe, incredibly low. According to the World Bank, one of the most coup-prone and politically unstable countries in the world. And yet, everybody is born with aspirations, particularly when it comes to education and health. How do you make promises that you can keep to people who get so much information from the outside world these days?
Merci beaucoup. Moi, je pense que Guinée-Bissau, c'est un pays de...
Here is what I think. Actually, Guinea-Bissau is a country of 2 million, but in all of the countries around the world, there is a demand for change. And when you look at it from the perspective of IMF or the World Bank, of course, there is an inspiration for change. I have been the president for 2 years, and we really have a very young population. I can't say that I'm really old. I'm going to become 50 years old this year. But I think here is what's important. We all need to be inspired by the change that the young people bring. So about our country, the instability, the chronicle instability that we have been, we had many opportunities to break that instability. So in many fields where we have formerly been invisible, now we became visible. And also when we look at the relationships with our neighbors, in the ECOWAS countries, we can observe that there are many changes. There are many changes in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Conakry. So towards myself also, there have been many attacks. 15 of my bodyguards have been killed, and this shocked the global community. And concerning our economic development, we have a more and more stable outlook, which will develop our country further.
2024. Correct me, please, if I'm wrong on that one. Do you think you are able to make promises that the electorate will believe after, well, what now, 2 years in power, and that would be for perhaps 5 years? How do you convince them? Not on a personal level, but on an information and aspirational level.
On aura les élections, pas en 2024, mais si en 2025.
Not in 2024, the elections are going to be held in 2025. So in order to convince them, you need to do you need to act and you need to show what you are going to do. So it's not only a rhetoric that functions here. With your actions, you have to put forward the change. So you have to be able to demonstrate that change.
Let me come to you, if I may. Prime Minister of Bulgaria, very, very young population. They must be worried about what is happening in nearby neighboring countries. How do you convince them that you have their best interests at heart? How do you represent change for them in a very, very uncertain world?
Thank you for the question. So I wanted to introduce a little, answering your question, I wanted to introduce a little different frame of thought. And the frame of thought is, what if we look at political change from an economic perspective? What if we look at political parties as economic units? If we assess political environment through the lenses of economics, we see something very, very similar across the world, even between democracies and more authoritarian regimes. And that is, usually there are very few players on the market. Usually, even in established democracies, there are 4 or 5 parties. And usually in autocratic regimes, it's usually one. But whether you have a single monopoly from an economic perspective to represent political power, or you have very few players, which is in economics called oligopoly, in both cases you have a very concentrated market. And in economics we know how these type of markets look like. If you have only few players in a single market, usually, whether it's oligopoly or monopoly, you have high level of prices, and usually the customers of these services are not treated as well as they want, and usually they're overpaying for high returns on the service providers. So who are the service providers in a oligopolistic political model? Usually they're the special groups that invest in the political parties, that are part of the contributors during elections, and usually these are the ones that you soon see to be after the political party gets into government, to want return on their investment. Return on their investment in terms of procurement, special projects, and so on. So the question that how we thought about, and this is how we've been thinking with a few colleagues from Harvard as well, is that you need to create competition in the political market, competition that actually is there to serve, to create better service to the customers, in this case the voters. So in this kind of concentrated markets, usually you have barriers of entry, and that's usually through media or legal restrictions. And usually you have the channels of communications are very limited. So how can you break such an oligopolistic model or monopolistic model, if it's an authoritarian regime, when you're a newcomer? Usually you need few prerequisites. And the first prerequisite is independent capital. You cannot be part of the same political model where you get political investors to help you start something new. If you use the same political investors to create a new political entity, that would get you back into the same oligopolistic model.
Well, may I just interrupt at this point? Is this something you are trying to tackle that is impressing the voters? Because Transparency International in 2017 noted that your country, Bulgaria, was the most corrupt in the European Union. So this is something that resonates with your people, is it?
I think, yes, for us it's very specific, but you can see it throughout the different political systems at different extents. So, by the way, when you say the most corrupt country in Europe, I hope
European Union.
In European Union, I hope that soon we're going to say the country that clean up corruption the fastest within the European Union.
That is very interesting. I'm sure you have much more to say. We have plenty of time.
Okay.
Yeah,
but just to finish the last point on this one. So here we have to think, how can we create competition in the political model, getting out of the barriers of entry, and how can we create value to the customers, in this case the voters, in this political economic model, so that change is brought.
Petrol, thank you very much indeed. We're going to get on to age in just a moment, if I may, because I'm seeing three politicians here who are of the younger generation, if you like. And I want to ask you, Marike, as somebody representing, well, in charge of the Council of Europe, an organization set up after the Second World War to represent human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, whether what you are seeing here, what you're hearing on this panel, represents the kind of change that you are being told is needed by the people you listen to.
I'm glad that you mentioned what are the three pillars on which, since 1949, the Council of Europe works. So it's democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And seeing the world around us this very day, we see everything changes, and very quickly. And I think in order to tackle the change, very good, Council of Europe is good at that while change is happening, we should not find ourselves in a shifting sands area. So the things that shouldn't change is this triangle. Whatever we do, I can take the recent, still we are with masks, with health. When the pandemic came, there was a threat to life. But while addressing threat to life, we needed not to lose these basic things, protecting fundamental freedoms. So from the perspective of organization, it is young people, and I think that's what we were talking about, and their concerns are very important. We have young people participating in the work of the Council of Europe in a co-decision on the issues that concern them since early 70s. We have European Youth Council, we have two European Youth Centers, one set up in Strasbourg back in '72, and another after the big change in Europe after the fall of Iron Curtain in '90s in Budapest. So what we hear from young people is that they want to be part of, they want to participate, they want their voices heard, and for instance, now we are not only concerned about what are the classics, what we do, protecting life, protecting prohibition of torture, but also freedom of expression and other fundamental freedoms. We are working on new areas. Artificial intelligence is one, new technologies, and we're talking about young people. I think all our lives of everyone is more and more permeate with technology, but with young people, they only work with technology. So what we do while acknowledging that with technology we have witnessed these huge advances in society, recently we see more and more dangers coming from the new technologies in artificial intelligence area. So we work now on how to protect the development of artificial intelligence, but protecting these fundamental freedoms and human rights at the same time. Or take environment. It's even something more of concern to young people very directly. We've seen recently young people voicing more and more and pressing political leaders and anyone who can do something for that there is tomorrow, and we are addressing that issue as well from the human rights perspective. So where the right to life, the basics for everyone, is also dependent on environmental protection. So we are really very much for youth participation, for young people participating, but also for addressing their concerns in particular areas, and I mentioned two on which recently we have been very much working on.
Maria, thank you for that. We will be throwing this open, if we have enough time, for a number of questions from the audience towards the end of this discussion. We've only just begun, but I'm giving you fair warning, so do have a think and we'll get round to that later. We're talking youth now. We're not just talking voters. We're talking about that old generation of the crusty, dusty, wrinkled, dried out, not just in terms of years, but in terms of ideas, politicians. Have they been consigned to the past in the eyes of those people who will, in the future, you hope, put you back in office? It's for all of you here, but I'm starting with you, Albi.
I believe it's very important to have a dense communication and a regular cooperation with youth, not to allow their alienation, in order to have them participate in social and political developments. But at the same time, we should not forget all others. I think there is such thing as people besides population. And people are young and old, women and men, children as well. And we have to, whenever we design policies, we have to be comprehensive in our thinking. But at the same time, we must be inclusive in our acting.
And are they therefore looking for younger politicians to bring them those ideas?
I think young politicians can bring new ideas, but this is not always that simple. Because very often some of the ideas which have been suppressed, once they prevail, they seem new. Their victory is new, not their being as such. And I think that in case of Kosovo, our ideas were not that new. And we were not either that young, but we were coherent and we started early on. However, without the energy of youth, it wouldn't be doable. But at the same time, while doing politics, one has to combine the wisdom of those who are rather experienced with the energy of those who are young, and then there is nothing which is not doable.
So let me ask you, Mr. President Umaru, if I may, have the days of the older, wiser, supposedly, politicians stroke leaders gone? Because somebody, you say you're going to be 50, I believe, this year. Not young, but certainly not old, and certainly you understand the younger voters more than people of the senior generation. Have the days of the older, supposedly wiser politicians gone because you and your generation can understand young people?
Ma génération, moi je pense qu'il faut toujours...
For my generation, there has always, I think that there should always be an interaction. So it's not like I'm wiser, or there is no such thing as I'm wiser and more intelligent. We should take that into consideration in the following way. The transition between the new generation and the older generations is that, including myself, I'm in between those two. So I have a contact with both I'm in between the younger generation and the older generation. So you have to position yourself well in order to enjoy both the experiences that are out there. And what do we do in Guinea-Bissau for that? Yes, we do have a young population. And when we look at Africa in general, we can say the same thing. So, of course, we consider the older generation to be wiser people from whose experience we can really make use. And we always have an inclusive approach for the older generation. So we always look how we can make use of that.
Young people do not necessarily have the push, the influence. That comes with age, and so you must not forget those people who have contributed to industry, to politics, and who may feel that they are being left behind if you concentrate only on the young. How do you cross that bridge, if you like, to make sure that when it comes to change, you're looking after everybody? Mr. President. Okay, well, I'll throw that one to you, Petrol, and then I'll come back. I understand you may have a problem. Okay. That's the simple.
So the one difference between maybe the generation is the channels of communication. So yet the content of both serving young and older generations should be fairly similar, and it's solving local problems. So what we did, I'll give you a quick example of what we did in our campaign. We took a bus and we went to every town in Bulgaria and we spoke with both young and old. And we see that some of the problems are similar. I mean, they all want better jobs, they all want better lifestyle, they want better infrastructure, better economy. So this part is the same. Whereas the difference is how do you take this content and this message that you want to bring and deliver it to the targeted groups, because now the media, the rounds of communications are a bit different. So what we created is we did a two-tier approach. So we used traditional media, normal TV, we were attending different programs and trying to bring the content. We also used, of course, social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. But where the confusion can happen is one may think this new generation, they think only about the social media. Social media is just the media. The content of solving the real problems and adding value to the real lives is actually very similar between the young and old. The channel of communication is a separate issue, just getting this message across, but the principles of solving people's problems is the same across the generations.
And is it only a younger politician that would understand that?
No, in our party, we're very young. We have many young people, but we do count on the experience of the older generation. I mean, we've attracted people that are in the late 60s, 70s, and it's about the mix. You have to combine innovation and energy of the younger generation, but you have to put the knowledge and experience together. Otherwise, there could be a distortion that you don't want.
Maria, what changes have you seen that have impressed you in terms of reaching out to that? I don't want to make it all about the young, but in terms of that new demographic, the younger voter, the aspirational young people, what changes have you seen across the continent that impress you?
In a way, it's a lot of young people engaging, or probably being more visible because they use all these channels of communication that are now instantly and immediately visible to almost everyone. So I think the impact, whether they are more than before, it's hard to say, but they are more visible and their impact is much bigger. I think, I mean, coming back to one of the areas I referred to where we work on environmental change and human rights, it's been very impressive how quickly young people woke up, probably because this challenge is huge and what is at stake is everyone's future but theirs for a longer time. So what is impressive is that they really woke up, they speak up, and I think if I look at the leaders around me, it's very good to have more and more young leaders, because I totally agree with you, Prime Minister. I was in the past leading a newly set ministry in my country of origin, and average age was 27. I was much younger than now. And we had exactly the question that you said. is having only young people abroad, very well educated. I think over 70% of them were outside, were having masters from outside our country of origin. So that was a huge, at the time, that was early 2000s. That was a huge benefit for the country and for me working with the team. But at the same time, they needed mentors, they needed knowledge, and all their energy could be better, channeled and enhanced, if you want, with that. And I was telling them always, the best you can get when you start to work is to have a good mentor. Because there, whatever your ideas are, will make you more clear how you make your ideas true or how you work on your ideas. So I'm impressed now, I'm in this position. I'm not in the proper sense of the word politician, but I am. And I think seeing more and more young change in generation in leadership on many of our member states, we have still 47, I think it's a huge asset, because the energy that younger leaders can bring, I think it's very important, and the challenges are multiplying.
Younger leaders, less selfish, if you like, younger people who want to contribute. How do you, Albi as Prime Minister of Kosovo, persuade them to stay and contribute?
One of the things which helps a great deal is getting some brain gain after years and years of brain drain. So we need some of the young women and men who are in diaspora to come back, and not into military service, but into a civil service. For our democratic state building, for our socio-economic progress, it's important to come back home.
And are you on a charm offensive, if you like, through social media, through other means, to try and say to them, listen, it's almost like advertising the best product in the world. Come back, you can be part of it.
Yes. For example, during the last year, we had economic growth of 9.9% of our GDP. Then exports increased by 2/3, tax revenues by 1/3 without changing fiscal policy, because when people are optimistic, they rather spend than save. And when they see that the government is not corrupted, they are more ready to pay taxes and contributions. And also investments increased by 55%, and annual state budget by 12%. So this is this affirmative approach and the success at home is bringing a bit of brain gain in our country. On the other hand, what is important is to show to all that digitalization, which is necessary, is not just good for communication, but for accountability, for transparency, and for qualitative services. So to bring youth, as they are now very much into digitalization, like no one else, to bring them from their position where communication is top agenda, to add to that these three other values of democracy.
Extraordinary. And I'd like to put to you, Mr. President, to you, Umara, the same question. You have a very young demographic. I think 60% of your country is below the age of 25. 65% of your country has an age of below 25. How do you persuade those that have decided to leave to come back to help? How do you persuade those who are still there not to leave?
Aujourd'hui, c'est difficile de ne pas de retenir la nouvelle génération africaine de rester sur place.
This is something that we need to be really careful about, because as you know, when we compare our country with Europe, everybody wants to go to Europe. But in Guinea-Bissau, or in Africa, we're trying to give them a reason to stay. The quality of life, you need to increase the quality life, you have to integrate it, and this is our strategy in Guinea-Bissau, the strategy that we're using, to keep the youth busy, to give them something to do. When a 25-year-old young person has much more information and knowledge compared to 30 years ago. So to convince them to stay, we need to give them employment. We have to provide employment, and we have to allow them to improve in the society. And when we look at the situation in Guinea-Bissau, there are lots of youth in politics. And our party, for example, was established 3 years ago, 2 years ago. We were in a good position in opposition, and we were able to talk to the president 2 years ago. So this is why we brought the youth into a movement, and we were able to get them into this.
Would the microphones be ready? And I'll ask people to put your... Okay, well, we'll go to that front row here first, or second row, if I may. But that's after we've heard from the Prime Minister of Bulgaria.
So we have to treat young talent as a very strategic national resource. So while we're still early on in developing it, we have to make sure that we create the right incentives for them to stay back and to stay at home. For example, we're just launching this year something that's found in many countries, but it makes a lot of sense, is creating scholarships. We call that grant loan programs, that if you decide to come back to work for Bulgaria, your student loan becomes a grant after a number of years. If you decide to live your life somewhere else, it just becomes a student loan. So even if they decide to choose to be outside, they already have this connection because somehow there was a relationship that was developed early on with the country, and you can exploit this connection and create value out of it. And the other thing is making sure that you give them purpose. Young people want not only high salaries, not only comfortable lives, they're searching for purpose as well.
And they want to be taken seriously.
And they want to be taken serious. So if you put them in the right setting, with the right mentors, where they can actually deliver value to the country, there is a benefit to this that is outside of the market forces.
You cannot put a price on it.
No.
This has been fascinating. I do a program for TRT World called Roundtable. Please feel free to tune in anytime. And the beauty is that we get to sit and talk to people absolutely honestly about the things they care about, and not necessarily the machinations of the political world, but their aspirations and how they match up to other people's. Can we get a microphone to the gentleman in the second row there, just behind the lady in the white jacket? And can I ask anybody asking a question to make sure that it's as clear as you can possibly make it, and just one question, rather than 3 or 4 that become a statement. And who would you like to address this to?
Good morning. I'm Sayyidina Omar Bajallo from Guinea-Bissau. I came from Ankara University. I'm doing international relations in Ankara. I would like to let you know how glad I am for being able here in such topic representing the change, and see my president here representing my country in high level with our foreign ministers here. I'm so glad to see them here. My question is, if we young Africans, are we ready for this change? If we are not, what can be done together for this change? Because we keep seeing that the world is changing every day, such as the COVID-19, so on. What can be done as Africans to attend this? Thank you.
Mr. President.
Moi, je pense que la nouvelle génération ne peut pas avoir peur des changements.
I actually see, I think that the new generations should not be scared of change. Everybody, we see that as a society or individuals, everybody faces challenges. We need to first understand this, and we need to see what we can do to overcome this challenge. Of course, it's important that we understand what the change is, and that's why our young friend, I think he knows that he needs to learn to live with change. As the young generations, you know that we need to integrate into change.
Are from the younger generation, and that they are the ones making the journey to come here to take an interest in what is happening up here on the stage because it affects their future. I think we have a question from the gentleman there. If you could stand up, sir, and tell me to whom you're addressing it.
Thank you. I'm a former permanent representative of Turkey to the Council of Europe, and my question will be addressed to Madame Buic. We did together in different times College of Europe. My quote will be from Antonio Gramsci, and I think current conditions in the international arena are very much proper to refer to Gramsci. We think, I think, the pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. How, in representing change, you reinforce the message of the optimism of the will, while everything, including shared values, are bringing more and more in a process of deterioration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, my promotion at the Council of Europe was Stefan Zweig, and I hope it's also very telling for the moment we are just now living through. For those who don't know, Stefan Zweig fled Austria and finally killed himself in Brazil in '42 because he couldn't believe what the world became with the Second World War. I hope we are not witnessing anything alike, but I think this pessimism of intellect and optimism of the will, this would be my motto. I mean, I think if we want, we will find a way. If there is a will, there is a way, as the saying goes. And as you made a reference to the very moment we are going through now as we speak, the horrible military aggression from one member state of the Council of Europe to the other, while, you know, in the Statute 1 we talk about peace and dialogue and ever more working together based on values and standards. And when you see actually the values and standards being so bluntly and flagrantly violated, we see where we are. And I'm glad to tell this audience that, you know, we see big unity within member states now to not to stop aggression, because we can't. This is there are others who should do that, calling to stop aggression, of course, but unity to come back to values and standards. And there is this area where I feel the optimism of will. There is a will. We are having these days almost every day meeting. I was supposed to be here yesterday for Antalya forum opening, but I had to be in Strasbourg in the morning and only later travel. Next week we are having an extraordinary session of Parliamentary Assembly. Already Committee of Ministers decided to suspend Russian Federation from being represented in many areas of work of the Council of Europe. More and more voices asking for more. So I think if I look at it from that perspective, I can witness a strong will to reunite behind the values and standards we stand for. And I think that's important for change, and I come back to European Convention on Human Rights and talking about, you know, this shifting sands. We are in shifting sands, but if we keep on first things first and what is the most important that should be framing anything, any action we do, I think...
If the foundations are
there
strong.
Is, exactly, and this optimism is in the will, actually.
Then no matter what goes on above, one hopes it's not
Exactly.
strong enough to destroy what's good underneath. Can we please move the microphone to the young woman in the front row? Third person in. And I'm going to hope that this question can be either directed to the Prime Minister of Bulgaria or the Prime Minister of Kosovo so that we share it out evenly. Please.
Hello, my name is Menekşe Küçükbüngör. I am from the University of Şehidabadi. First of all, it's a great honor to meet you all. In this forum that we all agree, I think young population is really important for everything and we can affect lots of things in a really good way. But when it comes to policy, it's not much actually, because some of them believe that policy can be dangerous, some of them believe that I'm too young for it. But my question is, and I'm sorry, they also try to find something to be in it. But my question is to each of you, what's the methods of your country to get young population interested in policy? Thank you.
Thank you. Petra, would you like to start with that, and then Albi, we will go to you. Then we've covered everybody on the panel.
So politics is not only about political parties or becoming a prime minister. It's about serving a cause. So the first step that the young people should be involved with is finding their own cause. It could be an environmental cause. It could be a social cause. It could be an NGO, Red Cross. And they should start fighting for this cause. And once they feel that they're empowered, they can make a difference, they can make a change in this one thing. It doesn't need to be countrywide. They start feeling empowered to do more. So I think getting young people involved is getting them passionate about something, putting them into a framework that they can cause the change, and that empowers them to want to do more. Thank you.
I agree with Prime Minister Petkov that politics is about a cause. So you do not join politics for some kind of temporary individual benefit. You join in a cause. But then in order to move on, I believe you need two things. One is you have to get together with others. Yes. A certain organization, because you cannot do it on your own. The cause is too big for any individual. And then you need a struggle. And here I would like to recall the Gramsci and Zweig situation, that from my own experience, of course, life is full of struggles. But then again, also struggle is full of life. While you fight, while you struggle, you also live better. And I think that this can help, especially young people who are very energetic, who are more ready than anyone else and more interested than anyone else for change. So a cause with a set of ideas and convictions for the benefit of general public, an organization where people get together, because we have to combine forces in order to win. Without solidarity, without getting together, there is no victory. And a struggle which you give and take. Because we always think in terms of political struggle that we're only giving, we're contributing. But we forget that from each struggle, quite often we're taking more than giving. Because we also change. While we want to produce change in the society, it is us who changes and becomes fit for the change that we want to see.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know there are many people, and hands are going up even now within the audience, who would like to say something, to ask a question. We have run out of time. Even the gentleman in the front row who managed to get the microphone in his hand before I'd recognized somebody will have to have the patience for another time. Listen, thank you very, very much indeed. One more plug for the programme, because it's all like this, and if you've enjoyed this discussion, hopefully you will enjoy Roundtable with me, David Foster, on TRT World. Listen, thank you, fantastic. And thank you. I'm going to take this off. Hey, listen, don't run, because I want to get numbers, if I may, because I do this programme. If you don't think I'm frightening...